Lyrebird can copy anyone's voice. A artificial womb grows a baby sheep. And Elon Musk digs a tunnel. Today is May 2nd, and you're watching The Innovation Report.
Hey everyone, today is May 2nd, and it's May already, so that means summer is just around the corner, and I'm excited for it. So, without waiting, let's just jump right into it. Starting first, do you know what a lyrebird is? So a lyrebird is a bird that can kind of mimic any sound. Now the thing is, with lyrebirds, whether it's a car alarm or a camera shutter or even dogs barking, a lyrebird can actually mimic it. So there's a new company out of Canada that is called Lyrebird, and the reason why they're called Lyrebird is because they're able to mimic exact voices.
I am not a robot. My intonation is always different. I'm not a robot. My intonation is always different.
So what you heard was actually not Donald Trump. That was actually Lyrebird's interpretation, or rather the output of the voice of Donald Trump. Now the thing is, Adobe created a vocal project that they released late last year. But unlike Adobe, which needed 20 minutes of audio, Lyrebird can do it with just 1 minute. Does that mean you can create a voice audio based on this entire video? Alright, next up is VR with Alzheimer. Now, if you know someone who has Alzheimer's, or perhaps you know a bit about it, it's basically you don't have the ability to use your brain as effectively for certain types of tasks. Particular is spatial recognition. So what researchers are doing is they're trying to figure out how can they use VR and help patients with Alzheimer's with spatial recognitions. So that means trying to figure out, well, where is it that you are in the world? How can you try to rebuild parts of the brain with spatial recognition? Alright, well, continuing on with Alzheimer's, looks like deep learning software can actually help predict the probability of someone actually getting Alzheimer's. So after taking a look at 182 normal brain images and 139 Alzheimer brain images, software was able to be 81% more accurate to help predict someone getting Alzheimer's in the next 3 years. Now this is coming out of South Korea, and there's a lot of work to be developed, but still this holds a lot of promise to see where the future holds of reducing or at least catching Alzheimer's as our brains start to deteriorate as we start to get older. So this is interesting because especially as we start to use more machine learning software, we can help predict and at least compose and analyze large data set of information. So I'm excited to see where this future holds as well. Well, looks like the world's first malaria vaccine is going to get piloted. Now, the malaria vaccine is going to be tested, which is called the RTS-S. The World Health Organization says that it could save tens of thousands of people. So, with the research and being underdeveloped right now, the world's first vaccine is actually fantastic for people who have malaria, and thereby reducing costs so people don't have to get blood transfusions and other expensive solutions to when you have the vaccine rather than having a precautionary measure. Alright, now this is a pretty interesting news. This is a artificial womb. And now this artificial womb was actually, if you take a look at it, it actually grew a baby sheep. Now the thing is, with this kind of artificial womb, what you can think about is, well, if this is where everything's heading, well, what's that going to mean for humans? Well, what researchers and scientists are able to try and figure out is that if you can take the same kind of system, you can also help with humans. Now obviously it's not being tested with humans yet, but that's the initial, or rather the idea of where it's heading towards. Now of course that causes concerns about, well, you know, if you can create this artificially, well, where does that lead to? Do you even need a womb itself? And this is kind of troubling, to be honest. Now thankfully there is a surgeon from the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, Alan Flake, who said that it's not necessarily science fiction that you can take an embryo through an early development process and put it on the machine without the mother being a critical element. So if you think about, well, what does that mean? So what that means is, if you look at what this bag is, so it's called the bio bag. Now, if you take the biobag for children who are born premature, that can actually help them grow more into a natural womb-like state. So that's the one benefit. Of course, it causes ethical concerns, and we don't know where the future holds for this and goes, but you can kind of see two different realms, one being certainly positive, one being certainly negative. So it's only in its infancies, and now we can see where this goes up to the next level. Okay, so in Spain's IPTEC Institute, Federica Bertoncini, when she's not working in her lab, she actually keeps bees. And then one day she found with her bees, she found these worms, a caterpillar called, before caterpillars turn into butterflies, it's waxworms. So she found these waxworms, and they actually cause a lot of headache. So she wanted to clean it out. So what she did is she put it into bags, these plastic bags, just temporarily. Now, what ended up happening was after she came back to it, several minutes later, she actually found holes in the bag. Now, the thing is, the waxworms, they actually started eating the plastic. So she got to thinking, well, if the waxworm can actually eat the plastic, can it be possible that we can use this waxworm to compose and get rid of plastic? Now, the thing is, these type of waxworm is able to look at the carbon bonds. It's very similar to wax present in bee honeycombs. And what she was able to do was try and figure out, well, if we can use these waxworms for digesting plastic, that'll help reduce our big plastic problem that we have, especially when it comes to garbage. You see tons of plastic bags being used everywhere around the world, so if we can reduce it, it'll help tremendously. Now, what ended up happening was the goal is really not to try and use just a simple worms, or rather millions of worms, to try and digest it. The goal is to try and figure out how can you use enzymes and replicate that enzyme so it could be used on a wide scale basis. And best part is it turns the plastic into ethanol that can be used later on. So this is just a fantastic discovery, and as research starts to develop, this can hold new potential for growth and reduce waste. Alright, next up is diamonds. Now, have you ever bought a diamond? If you haven't, that's okay. The thing is, a lot of people, when they're buying diamonds now, they want to buy diamonds from conflict-free areas. There we go. Now, the thing with diamonds is that, especially if you've seen blood diamonds, the circumstances just to mine diamonds causes a lot of problems in many parts of the world. So Hyperledger, what they're trying to do is they're trying to use blockchain technology to try and figure out and identify and create a solid ledger across the world for diamonds. Now, this will help you truly identify where is it that diamonds are coming from, and not just have a paper card just saying, okay, well, this is where it's coming from, but actually be able to track all the way the history to where diamonds are coming from. Now, the best part is it actually will reduce over $2 billion in fraud with jewelry. By using a Hyperledger, this kind of system is not going to be only limited to just diamonds. It could be applied to a whole bunch of other jewelry or even other objects. Alright, next let's talk about Elon Musk's new company. He announced a new company called Boring Company. So the Boring Company's intention is to try and figure out how can you create tunnels underground to help reduce traffic congestion. So if you take a look at LA, what Elon Musk said that going from Westwood to LAX, Los Angeles Airport, which would normally take 30 minutes to 40 minutes on a good day, can be brought down to 5 minutes. Now, he says that it takes approximately 2 to 3% of his time, and the engineers who are working on it, they're largely doing it on a part-time basis. So it's more like a hobby for him. Now, what he is trying to do is, and what he was suggesting is, building tunnels underground, you have a lot more room than if it was above ground. So in his TED Talk that he recently gave last week, what he spoke about was that, well, if you have flying cars above you, that's fantastic, but it's not necessarily going to make you feel that much safer or calmer if you're just walking around on the street. Because if people are not servicing their vehicle, you don't want to make sure that something falls, right? So you kind of be worried. Whereas if things are underground, you wouldn't even see them. So the intention is to build a lot of tunnels underground, and obviously that causes a lot more issues in terms of space, zoning rights, and all those details. But what it allows to do is, from a utopian perspective, help speed transportation and reduce traffic congestions. Now, the one thing to keep in mind is as self-driving cars start to be more popular, what ends up happening with the traffic congestions, it'll actually increase, because the use of public transport will actually decrease because the cost efficiencies. Now, what will end up happening is, as more people are starting to use self-driving cars, autonomous vehicles, what that will mean is there's equally more traffic congestion. Now, surely the speed will certainly increase a tad bit, but there'll still be traffic congestion. Now, what that means is, by having tunnels underground, it will be able to drastically move things along much quicker. All right, now let's talk about news, or rather fake news. You see, there's a lot that has been said with fake news recently, especially with election and a whole bunch of other situations. So Jimmy Wales, the founder of Wikipedia, is actually trying to get the best of both worlds with Wikipedia and journalism. So the thing with Wikipedia is there's a lot of content, a lot of information that's constantly being updated. Now, with news, it's already, or rather the situation with news is that anyone can create a news, and what ends up happening is that it's not being fact-checked. So what he's trying to do is he's trying to merge both worlds by creating Wiki Tribune. Now, Wiki Tribune, the intention is to have a fact-checked global news story, a story that's constantly evolving, that's going to be verified by professional journalists and citizen journalists. Now, the thing is, with this Wiki Tribune, it's going to be funded not by advertisers, unlike a lot of other sources or where news are being provided, but it's going to be provided, or rather funded, by citizens. And the citizens also can help support and fact-check the news. This is a new era of trying to create news for the next generation. Well, that's it for the Innovation Report this week. Hope you enjoyed it. Again, you can always find us on YouTube or iTunes. If you want to see more information as well as other in-depth guides, check out bigcreate.com. And as always, I'll see you next week.